All right, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We're going to go ahead and get started. Today is kind of a special webinar, so we thank you for joining. Today is the last Ask the Expert webinar for the season. We Ask the Expert is taking a little hiatus, much needed, to be honest. So this is going to be the last one for a little while before we discuss our new webinar program. So hopefully that makes you feel special for being part of something great. With that being said, today we are going to discuss with Julia income statement and a balance sheet deep dive. And your host for today, Julia, with New Age Financial Consulting, offers bookkeeping and accounting support, including CFO services for large and small businesses, specializes in unique and complex accounting needs for interior design firms and showrooms, and offers a comprehensive procurement service for designers and showrooms as well. So if you want to get in touch with Julia, she is extremely popular, especially after doing the Ask the Expert webinars. I can provide you her contact information at the end of this session as we wrap up, and you can reach out to her if need be. Last house cleaning item of the webinar is the QA button. Please use the QA button in your Zoom toolbar. If you have any questions, drop them in the box that pops up, and then we will make sure we get those tackled for you. With that being said, Julia, I will give it over to you. It is your last Ask the Expert for the season. How do you feel today? How are you?
I'm good. How are you? You're always so kind. Too kind, really.
It's probably the amount of caffeine I ingest. Otherwise, I don't know. Caffeine makes me feel
That's funny. Okay, let me share my screen and make sure we see the correct screen because it's a super fun game we play. Do we see studio?
Game, set, match. You're good to go.
Okay, perfect. Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining as always. Yes, it'll be our last weekly Q&A until September, until everyone goes back to school. And we're going to actually end today with one of my favorite topics, and we're going to talk about income statements and balance sheets and just do some higher level of the accounting review or overview in Studio. So you could find your income statement and your balance sheet by going to reports down here, right click. I always right click. I always like to have more than one tab open up here at the top. I find it a lot easier. And then because I am old, and so used to desktop, remember, Anthony, we talk about legacy reports. No, I actually mentioned it to somebody. Oh, I must have been when I was with Rick last week with Studio. I
Uh,
said to him how much I love that they're called legacy. I was like, they should just be called amazing.
yeah, anytime we start feeling like, honestly, I think anytime we start feeling old, we should start saying I'm in my legacy era. I think we should
Oh,
start
that's really good. I'm now officially midlife, so
your
I should
legacy era.
refer myself to that all the time. But anyway, the legacy reports they do date back to the older, maybe our older users who are familiar with Studio Desktop. But this is where, personally, somebody like myself, this is where I go to get a lot of my critical financial reports. So the top two here in the middle column are the balance sheet and the income statement. Friendly reminder, Studio Designer is accrual based only, right? It operates your general ledger on an accrual basis. We will review what that means momentarily. So let's actually start with our income statement because it'll be a little bit easier. And so we're going to go to, I clicked on income statement and I'm going to look through, let's look at all of this year. So January through June up here. I don't like to look at zeros. I like to exclude those. I think it makes it really cluttery. Remember, this is the test database, so sometimes the information is in here is super wild. Sometimes you're looking at it and you're like, wow, this is fantastic. And sometimes you take a look and you're like, oh, wow, I don't know what happened. So this is your income statement. Now, this is based only on invoiced, so especially revenue. So income sales, income time billing, and income miscellaneous. So these are based upon items or invoices. And so if an item is not invoiced, it doesn't populate into this screen. And if you're utilizing Studio the way it was set up and the way, if you continue to follow this setup of the chart of accounts, which we'll talk about briefly today too, anything here under income sales, this will be related only to your item screen. So this is all of these lovely, so I always go to Tom Hanks up here. So this will be related to 19th Street. And these are all of these different random items, and anything that's invoiced populates here. And because of the setup, I'm able to tell that, okay, well, sales furniture, sales fabric, right? These all tie to sales codes. And so this is all item related. The next section is income time billing. And I do think we talked a little bit about this last week in terms of how detailed do you want to see your income time billing and what's important to you. So if you're a firm that does interiors and architecture, it would be really helpful for you. This was our example last week. It would be really helpful to you to be able to see where my architecture time or what my architecture time is and what my design time is here. And so we have now began to break this out, and we did that through activities, and then we linked that to the correct sales code. And we could do a quick overview of that as well, but it's also recorded from last week on a much greater detail. And so this section is only related to fees. And this, if you wanted, for example, to understand how much you were making in hourly fees, you could break that down. How much are you making in flat fees? You could break that down if you so choose. And this is your total for the year. So then the next section is really income, I would say random, but it is miscellaneous, typically reimbursables. Actually, typically reimbursables are up here in time billing. But any type of commissions, maybe you're getting, if you're working with a mill worker or somebody in carpentry and they're sending you back like a referral income or anything like that, that would go into this bucket. Cost of sales. So this, and again, especially if you're following the chart of account setup that was provided with your studio database, this directly ties to this. So nothing should be in here that isn't tied to an item, and that item should be on an invoice. So that's a really good standard rule of thumb. I also always very, very quickly, I take this number, so 157,000. That's what it says in here. And I would divide it by 967. That is inaccurate because I know what this crazy adjustment is, but let's pretend that that's just normal freight income or something. Because I'm looking all the time to say, okay, well, where am I in terms of margin? Did I do a good job with my margin, or did I do a terrible job? In this example, I did an amazing job because my cost number actually came in really, really, really low. And actually it's right here too, so it's 16%. So if we were to remove this 709,000, I mean, that would be a much more accurate representation of where we are with our margin. But if that's not something you've checked in on, I wouldn't necessarily say you should look at it every day, but definitely look at it quarterly and definitely look at it at the end of the year. So those are some bigger ticket line items on the income statement on the revenue side. And then our administrative expenses in here, as you could see, they're a bit wild and not accurate. But this would be anything related to overhead. And so this you're posting into your general ledger through either your money out screen, so accounting money out here, or you're using the import. And this is everything related to office payments. So that's the way the income statement is categorized. And because we're on an accrual basis, the balance sheet is critically just as important. So if you go back to reports and we go back to legacy, and the balance sheet is the first one. So this 4010. And well, let's pull it through June. Let's get rid of my zeros. And so your balance sheet is actually giving you the other piece of the puzzle. So at the very top, your balance sheet is listing all of your assets. So we have 27 different bank accounts, just to keep it exciting. We have one with negative funds, so that's obviously super accurate. We also have one with $2.3 million or 1.7. Oh, that's really funny. So this is giving us our total cash. Then on towards the top but middle, right, it's telling us our inventory. And this is coming from the inventory module. And then we have some of what I actually find very fascinating accounts, but may take a bit of time to get used to, especially if you're coming over from like a QuickBooks or something like that, is this vendor deposit. and this client deposit. So remember how Studio works. So any item, let's find one. Do we have one that's not inventory? Sometimes that can be tricky. Budget antique desk from Belgium. Nope, but that's inventory. How about this damaged item? Those are negatives. Sometimes it's very hard to find a quality item in here. We could enter one. Invoiced. Oh, here's an item. I mean, it doesn't matter. It says it's getting refunded and it's on an order. So, and it's actually, it has money applied to it on the selling side, but it's not on a proposal. So that's a no-no, but pretend it doesn't look like that. And so here's this item. There's, the client paid for it and we paid the vendor. So as soon as the client paid for it and as soon as we paid the vendor, that transaction lives in something called vendor deposit here on the vendor side and client deposit here on the client side. And so it's not converted to our income statement yet. It's not converted to our cost of sales. It's living in something that we could refer to as work in progress. And so if you've never pulled a work in progress report, I would just advise again, that's something that you add to your list in terms of review, same quarterly, maybe on a project by project basis, or at the very, very least annually. So how do we then understand how all of this goes from the item and it flows onto our income statement? So maybe we get rid of the word refunded and we'll throw this on a proposal and then we'll invoice it. Why does it say refunded? Oh, because I must have refunded it. Maybe this is our shipping. Is this our freight? Oh yeah, so it's other costs. Well, let's pretend we didn't refund it. Let's pay for it again. Just so we can see all the moving parts. This is a what? What is this? Is it a sconce? It's a round table length. Okay, great. Why would that matter, Anthony? We have this conversation all the time. It's gonna be $950. I mean, I don't know. I want it to be semi-relevant. I don't want to. It makes me laugh. So okay, so we have two table lamps. They're round. The client was rejecting them, then they changed their mind yet again. You know that happens. And so I need to charge them again. And I changed my unit price. I don't know if I changed my quantity. Oh, and I updated my markup. Okay. I'm going to put this on a proposal. So if any of you have ever, I would say, listened or joined in, I'm a really big believer of all items going on a proposal. Then there are a few exceptions to that rule. But I really do like that workflow. I think it allows us to utilize reports in a much, I would say, better way. And I just like that workflow personally. So this particular client has a lot of money in in client deposit, sorry, not work in progress. And so they are able to pay for it right away. So I want them to pay for it immediately. So we went to money in, we're paying for it out of work. I keep saying work in progress. I must really want to look at that report. Out of funds available down here, I'm posting the payment. And then at the same time, because they paid for it so quickly, I'm going to go in and pay that order. And we're actually, what the heck is happening here? Oh, it's because they're, all right, pretend you also don't see this credit. We're gonna pay for it on the Amex. Yes. And this should really come off of this order. Okay, that's okay. So we're back in our item screen. Round table lamp. Okay. So here's our round table lamp. Just let's ignore 14B. I would make it inactive, but it has money on it, so we're obviously never supposed to do that. And so at the moment, it looks like, right, the client paid for in full, we paid the vendor in full, it's living on a proposal and it's on an order. But how does that then relate to our balance sheet and our income statement? So from the income statement perspective, because it's not invoiced, there actually isn't any general ledger activity that's tied to this transaction at all. Well, excuse me, there's no income statement activity that's tied to this transaction. At the moment, everything is living in vendor and client deposit. So if you notice, so I opened up accounting and I opened up my general ledger tab. I usually always have this tab open. I really like it. I'm constantly referencing, what's getting posted or what I need to review, or did I utilize suspense correctly? So I could see by my date range here that as soon as I paid this order, 200,351, and here's my vendor here. If you notice, here's my payment related to Amex, but the other side of it is vendor deposit, which is correct. So that's great. So the system is attributing that this payment that will eventually turn over into cost of goods sold is living in vendor deposit. And then at the same time, if you look on the client side, this 2744.55 is also living in client deposit. And so, especially as you're managing larger projects, the other two reports to keep in mind for projects that are not invoiced or that you're working on to make sure that all of that information is accurate is looking at this client deposit report. And so that was under our legacy reports, under the report tab. You also have this large number here on your balance sheet, right? This $3 million, but you're going to look at that and say, well, oh my gosh, I have no idea what that's made up of. So go to the client deposit report. We could filter it. We could put a back date on it to say, okay, well, if I'm trying to file 2023 tax returns, I'd like to last year, please remember, I don't like my zeros, so I always take those out. And I go to PDF, and this is going to break it down for me. And I'm going to say, holy moly, here's everything that's totaling client deposit. So 3.169. We talk about this when we do close the year. This number, this total on this, so this is a sub ledger. This is a report that ties into and rolls into your balance sheet. These numbers should tie. Ours do not, and we've actually had this discrepancy for a number of years now. But if you wind up doing a good job from the beginning, that will not happen. And there's a way to resolve it. And again, we'll talk about it for sure when we close out yet another year with a discrepancy. So this is my total, 3.169, but it's actually made up of a couple of buckets. So if you go to the top of this report has 5 columns, and it's always, and actually you could find this information in a number of places. The client deposit report summarizes it all for you. But if you also wanted to understand, if you were looking at the clients, for example, if you go to projects and all addresses, at any point in time, you could go to 19th Street and under codes, see how much they've paid as well. So just depending on how you like to look at it and what's easier. So this is telling us how much the client paid in full. This is total money received. So funds received. This is telling me out of the total funds received, how much is living in proposal deposits. Proposal deposits and funds available make up client deposit, which then lives on your balance sheet here. So anything that's in the invoiced column does not impact client deposit. And again, remember, client deposit is always this column and this column. So this is telling me that for Tom Hanks and Rita Wilson, they have $69,000 of money tied to items that are living on proposals. And then they have an additional very large amount in funds available, right? The $761,000 is quite a bit. And then their total client deposit is $831. So something to do, for example, towards the end of the year or as you're closing out a project would be to say, is John Adams, is that project complete? If the answer is yes, then they shouldn't have any money in proposal deposits. They shouldn't have any money in funds available. And everything that they've paid should be living in invoices because there's nothing outstanding. That job is 100% complete and installed. So you could go through these one by one. If this is something you've never done, I would absolutely recommend that you pull this report and understand what is happening with your client deposit, what I call the subledgers, right, with this detail. Because if you need to begin to close out projects. Oh, I'm sorry, I think it stopped sharing. If you need to close out projects, this would be a really good place to start. So what we're doing too, like if we're working with a firm and somebody says, oh my gosh, I've never closed out a project, this is the first place I go. Now remember, client deposit filters by automatically here. It's filtering by all active active and inactive projects. So if you're really good at closing out projects and you want to, for example, only look at active versus inactive, you could toggle that on here. But I wouldn't necessarily recommend doing that unless you're absolutely clear that you've been closing out projects correctly. So this is a great beginning place to understand client deposit, and then vendor deposits are actually, I think, can be a little bit trickier. So a report that I would recommend pulling that isn't necessarily the vendor deposit report, but it should be here under legacy, is work in progress. So we're looking at work in progress by vendor. And so what does work in progress mean? So work in progress, whoops, is any item first dibs. Oh, I actually like to look at it by client. So I actually go back to all and type in work in progress. And I like to look at the work in progress by client, preferably. Or you could look at the item detail too. But if we do work in progress by client, let's actually type in 19th Street. We'll be able to see this lovely circle lamp that we just entered. So the criteria, like what qualifies something for work in progress? So work in progress is any item that has an order number that's not invoiced. So the system cannot differentiate for you to be able to say, well, you created this order for first dibs back in 2020. And as you could see, the purchase cost and the selling cost were really net zero. One has a payment, one doesn't. The system doesn't necessarily correct you to say, well, this is right or this is wrong. The only criteria for this report, so again, for the work in progress report, is an item needs to be on an order, and that order and that item are not associated to an invoice. But that doesn't necessarily mean that the order happened, that there's a balance, that there's not a balance, that the vendor is overpaid or underpaid. It just means that it's living on an order. And then from this point in time too, if it's living on an order and it's not invoiced and there's a vendor payment, it's living in vendor deposits. So I know that can be a little bit confusing. I don't necessarily concentrate too much on vendor deposits. The philosophy really should be, again, if you're utilizing Studio correctly and you have a really good item process, your work in progress will dictate if your vendor deposits are correct. So similar to everything we've just talked about in terms of pulling a client deposit or pulling an income statement, if this is something you've never looked at before, I would definitely recommend you could look at it across the board, meaning run it without any type of filters. Or if you know that you're going to be closing out a project soon, run it by project, really again, I like the client one personally. I really like to understand what's going on with each client. And so where's our circular thing? Dining chair. Oh, here it is. So that's right. We have this this credit. So here's my Terry large round table. This does tell me my selling price, but it also tells me that my purchase price is 1922 and my vendor payment is 1922. And this item literally, oh, this PO must have been, my example was really old. Great. But this PO was created, so now it's funny, I thought it was 2023, over a year ago, and it's still living on this report because that item was never invoiced. Really great question that has come in. Is there a way to track client deposit by client? For example, if you want to reconcile the balance in the client deposit account, or if you believe that the funds available amount or the client deposit for a particular client is incorrect, is there a report that shows when received deposits from a particular client and how they were applied? So yes, but really the way to reconcile it, so there is a great report that I love. But the way to reconcile client deposit is to pull your balance sheet, look at this total, and then pull that subledger report. So that subledger report, again, it should tie, just a reminder that the test database has, actually, we've tracked down that error because we go through the process of how do you find it. So here's your 3169, right? So you should be able to go through each one of these buckets to then understand is this correct or is this incorrect? And so then to further the question, so if you know that something is incorrect on the client level, yes, you could backtrack anything in terms of client deposits, right? Remember, money in, so cash receipts in Studio are super permanent. There's no way to delete them, right? They could only be reversed. So a really great report to look at how money was applied or moved around is this payment application report. Anthony, look, it says legacy. It's why it's a favorite. So go to all reports, type in payment application, and you have these 3 that pop up. I personally really like to review it by date. I don't necessarily like it by item, though I will definitely utilize that, especially when we're working with some of our designers and they're really trying to understand like price differences on an item. But I like it by date because chronologically it's how my brain works. And so if I look at 19th Street, I am able to see anytime money has ever been moved around. So I could see that it was received and applied. I could see that it was just applied. I could see money coming in and out of client deposit. It's funny, I like to look at this report a lot. So here's my notations, scroll down, scroll down, scroll down. And
If
this would tell
this
you,
is what you look at, Julia, when you want to de-stress, I'm really gonna have to be worried about you.
I don't know. I'm telling you, I like it. I also really like utilizing this filter too. So like we will absolutely send this to, meaning we'll utilize this report to be client facing. If the design firm has been, I would say, let's say, has been good about maybe their client communication, and if we send this to clients for sure. Like this report is client facing in my opinion, but I wouldn't use that. You need to do some more due diligence on your end in terms of like how you disclose information. What does your client contract say? But this is absolutely a client facing report. But from here, if your client says to you, well, can you tell me anytime money has ever been moved in and out of my client deposit? It really can be helpful to in these standard filters, take out these 2, take out receive and apply, and take out receive miscellaneous. And these 2 payment applications, receive payment and apply, will only they'll only show you money coming in and out of client deposit. Because when you receive and apply, even though it's coming out of client deposit, there's no pricing discrepancy, though that's money going directly to an item and bypassing the funds available account. So bypassing, I want to leave that screen open. Well, bypassing this, but I don't ever like to look at it in here. I always look at it in money in. Bypassing this. But if a client says to me, well, can you please help me understand how we got to this number? This would be the report I use, and these would be my filters. Receive payment and apply payment. Yes, if you don't have client deposit or payment application by date, that's definitely part of your subscription. And Anthony, I can't keep track of the 3 names. 2 of them start with an E. I think there's an enterprise and a something.
Enterprise Essentials is the bottom tier, Enterprise, and then Premier.
And is Premier the top?
Yeah, Premier's the top tier.
And Enterprise is the middle? I'm sorry.
Correct.
Yes, so for the user that's asking about subscriptions, yes, the lower level, like the basic tier, really is basic. And so if you're someone who either has, I would say, a good amount of volume, or you're really enthusiastic like myself about these project reports or project worksheets, I really would recommend you upgrade to the middle tier because there's so many reports. Even if you just go to reports and go to like project worksheet reports, there's so many project worksheets that you're missing out on that have a lot of valuable information. So definitely just think about that. Okay, so we talked about the payment application. If you filter by these two payment types, you'll only see money that's in and out of the funds available account. So something to keep in mind for sure. Okay, so we're back to client deposit. Let's say that we're in a really solid place and we are ready actually to invoice out all of 19th Street, though I don't think that's remotely close because that project report I'm sure is a really big hot mess. So if I'm ready to invoice, I'm going to go to my 2010 project worksheet by room. I'd like to at least invoice a couple items. Because as soon as I start invoicing, my client deposit gets impacted, my vendor deposit gets impacted, and my income statement and my balance sheet start to go up. I'm slightly scared to invoice a bit. I don't, here's my round lamp. This item looks clean. I can invoice it. 1 out of 12. Here's another one. Oh, this one is invoiced. Let me take out invoice. Invoice is blank. Let's see what's going on this way. I have a lot of money in client deposit in here, but I'm really trying to make sure that my income statement for the year is correct. And so for those of you filing tax estimates, those estimates are due 6/15, and that's for 2024. So if you have any type of questions, this is a really great time to reach out to your tax accountant, or if you know that you're behind on invoicing and meaning recognizing revenue, again, really great time to say, oh my gosh, let me go in and do that because my income is going to be impacted. Let's just invoice this one clean item that we could see. Here's my large round lamp. Oh, it's still here. Okay. So I select the item and I put it on an invoice. We can ask the question a lot of, well, if it's a zero due invoice, do we need to send it to the client, meaning your client? And the answer is no. You don't need to. You can. Every office process is going to be a little bit different, but you absolutely have to throw that particular item on an invoice in Studio to close the item lifecycle. You have to do that. So I selected the item, I threw it on this invoice. The invoice balance at the bottom is 0, but I did invoice the item. So now let's go back and retrace some of our work. So let's go to client deposit and look at that number to see what changed. Actually, we could just go back to 19th Street. So now we're on 19th Street. Should have a previous one up somewhere. So my proposal deposit was 69,741, but now it's 66,973. So my total didn't change, my 1.1 million, right? That number still stayed the same, but these buckets changed. And so now $69,000 was reduced, and my invoice payment number, that bucket went up because we recognized revenue. Now, what happened with work in progress? So let's go back to the work in progress report that I like. Let's look at it by client. Let's go to 19th Street. Hopefully I didn't close out the other one. But here's where's our circle? Blue lamps out of stock. Oh, here we go. So here's our table lamp. That's the credit. The credit we didn't invoice because we have no idea if it's correct. But, oh, this is a project worksheet. But the item that we did invoice, oh, here we go. So work in progress by client, that total on the purchase side was 20,686. And now it went down to 18,673 because we invoiced an item for about, I think it was $2,900 or $2,500. And then the last piece of the puzzle is really, we could look at the income statement, but we could also look at the general ledger. So refresh your GL. And so now, oh my goodness, you could see all of these transactions that are linked to this one item. And we can see, here we go with here begin our entries. So as soon as we invoiced, as soon as we created this one invoice for this one item, all of these back-end general ledger entries were created. And so we now recognize sales lighting, right? So remember, go back to our income statement. Sales lighting, right? That's living in the top half. That's living under this first section. So those are related to items. So sales lighting, a general ledger was created for that. Sales tax payable Sales tax payable in studio is only recognized also upon invoicing. That's the only time we're picking up that liability. So be very mindful and very careful when you're filing your sales tax. Remember the sales tax report in here too, that's only on an accrual basis. So if you have a large amount of work in progress and a large amount of client deposits, that sales tax liability at any point in time could be extremely, extremely high. So keep that in mind. So that was created. We created accounts receivable, right? Because in theory, the client could have owed us money, but they didn't. So it was created and then opened and closed at the same time. But the other really important piece, and we already looked at it, is that client deposit went down. And then at the same time, so every single item in studio has this lovely, amazing sales code. And that sales code is what ties all of these columns together. Purchase cost and selling cost. So your sales code up here dictates where this goes, the subtotal, and where this goes, the subtotal, and then where the markup goes. And so assuming that we picked the correct sales code, this is what's keeping our income statement correct in terms of revenue and cost of goods and margin. So even though it was just one tiny item, one, two, I don't know, 12, 10 entries got created to make sure that all of those things are being captured accordingly. I wouldn't recommend looking necessarily in here every single time you invoice. Obviously, I think it'd make your head spin, but just to really understand the process and what Studio is doing in terms of revenue recognition and then vendor and client deposits. I actually find if you just look at one item, it'll really help you understand all of those different moving parts, every stage of the accounting cycle or every stage of the accounting process. So when the item goes on a proposal, and then the proposal is paid, and then the purchase order is issued, and the purchase order is paid, and then finally when the whole thing is invoiced. Next question. So we send our bills for items out on proposals. Do you recommend turning that into an invoice before sending anything to the client? So personally, I'll answer this question personally. My answer to that is no. I actually really like to hold off on invoicing. Again, just the personal preference and what I think works really well. I like to hold off on invoicing until I know this report, and this is the report that I use, is clean in terms of the here column and here column. Because if you have price changes, if you have freight changes, if you have yardage changes, if items are on a proposal, right, you have the flexibility to change pricing, whether it be up or down, right? And then you're changing pricing on the proposal, and all of those buckets, that vendor and client deposit, like those buckets are still living on your balance sheet and they're not impacting your income statement. As soon as you invoice, this blue side table is invoiced. As soon as you invoice, it's locking down your selling side, but your purchase side actually remains open. So you could go in and make this, $22 million, and it'll increase your cost of goods on your purchase order. And it'll increase your cost of goods on your income statement. So you really need to be careful. I like to use invoicing as an internal function of accounting. I use a lot of other reports for client total, for client payment balances. We review a lot of other reports to understand if clients owe us money. One of them is another favorite of mine is the client total balance report. So this is something that I would use to say, okay, well, a client paid for proposals. Proposals were issued at 100%, but prices changed, right? That happens. But I still would like to continue to collect money. I also really like to collect money, obviously, before installs. And if it's really long lead times or installations, I'm constantly looking at a report like this to be able to understand, should I go back to the client for additional money? Test bed, 121,000, and that's really funny. So this client owes us $241,000. So that's my own personal preference, but that only works well if you have a good proposal process, or you have a good report management system. How are you utilizing your project reports to understand where you are with balances. So again, I think there's mixed reviews on it. So if invoicing, for example, works for you and you feel confident with that, and you know that you don't have price changes, then that's certainly something you can adapt. My preference, especially the firms that we work with, that's really something that we're trying to utilize invoicing as just a function of accounting. So hopefully that was helpful there. I think those are really the again, high levels in terms of the income statement and the balance sheet. I mean, I know that they can be confusing. I know that they can be difficult sometimes to understand. I do think being very clear that Studio is accrual based only, that there isn't a cash toggle like you have in QuickBooks, and there's a reason for that, is critical. If that's not something you've discussed with your tax preparer, also just jot it down, add it to the list for sure. Make sure that you reach out to them to say, hey, Studio's accrual, I want to make sure we're filing accrual, or if we're not and we're filing cash, then you're doing those cash conversions manually, because the system is not going to spit those out for you. And I really think lastly, if you've never looked at the income statement and balance sheet, really make sure that you can find them and that you can talk to somebody and understand really what they mean. Those would be some of the key takeaways. What do you think, Anthony? Good?
I think that was great. And honestly, like not bad. Like got through all of that in 45 minutes so we can like yield some time back.
Super
Well,
fun
again,
stuff.
what's that?
I said it's super. These are two of my favorites.
Well, honestly, I kid you not, there's always something new that I learn every single week. And then ultimately when I jump into our queue to like kind of help like move it along and make sure we're meeting our SLAs and whatnot, I usually can apply it almost right away instantly. In fact, when you went into the WIP report, I actually have a case right now that I'm going to be responding to after we wrap up here.
Oh, that's funny.
Use. Yeah, it never fails. It's always applicable.
I'm just going to answer this one last question. So, how do I recommend if I'm not using invoicing as a method of collecting payments? How do you recommend going to clients for additional money? So, I think yes, one of the suggestions is, well, can I send the same proposal? You can, but that can get really confusing, right? So, if you've never looked at this report, this is a really great tool, whether you decide to make it client facing or you decide to use it as an internal tool. So, this 04 project worksheet for client total balance is automatically a client-facing report. There's nothing on this report that can't be sent to a client. And you could then go to this report and say, okay, Studio, well, show me, I mean, these proposals aren't going to make sense, right? Because these are all proposals. Show me, I do this, and then I'm like, well, that's a waste of time. Hold on, let me find some proposals. Show me, actually, let me go to the proposals. Proposals. Filter that report by only the proposals that had price changes, but just because it makes it a cleaner experience for the client. So I'm going to show them 538 and 550. 538, 100, 550. So you could also add images to this report, right? You could customize this report like any item based, any project worksheet report. But then if the client has paid for some of these items, there'll be a dollar value associated with each item, and then there'll be a balance. Because what's confusing about both proposals and invoices, actually, so even if you send a client a final balance invoice, a lot of times they still come back to say, oh my gosh, well, I already paid you 12,000 out of 15,000. Why do I have this pricing difference of $3,000? But this report actually breaks it out to them by item. So they'll always be able to see the dollars tied to every single item and then their balance. So the proposal is prettier, right? Like this is a little bit boxy. I mean, I think it's great, but I think for the designers, they don't love it. But remember, you can customize this a million different ways. And then this should be very clear for your client to say, I understand this is how money was applied, and then here are my balances. Maybe just one last quick note. You could even add notes into here. If you're good about using notes on each item to be client facing, you could add notes to any item-based report as well, so that the client could very quickly scan through a note column to say, oh, freight changed. Oh, the the hide for this leather was incorrect, so we had to order a new one, so there was a pricing discrepancy. So that's just I think a quick little tip. But that's
And
a great question.
a very valuable one at that. All
Oh,
right. Well, Julia, again, I can't tell you enough how much we appreciate and value your contribution to Studio Designers platform for doing these webinars for us. Really appreciate it. Enjoy the much needed break. Hopefully there'll be some downtime and some breathing room for you. I know you're like super slammed all the time anyway. But if you do need to reach out to Julia, give her at least 24 hours after this webinar to regroup and be prepared. But you can reach out to her, Julia at newhfinancialconsulting.com. Her phone number and her website are there as well. You need to reach out to Studio Designer Support. The quickest and most efficient way to do that, to get answers right away, is through our help center or our chat bot. That way you can scan through the articles. Our chatbot is actually supported by ChatGPT. So it scans all the relevant information out of the articles, so you don't have to go digging for it in the help center. Super, super helpful with immediate responses. And if you need something more specific, it can also route a case or a ticket for you to an agent that will respond as soon as humanly possible. With that being said, you all have a wonderful rest of your week. And we'll see you again soon, hopefully at the other webinars we host or when we pick back up in September for Ask the Experts Return. In any event, enjoy the rest of your day, folks. Have a good one.
thank you, Anthony. Talk to you soon.
All right, Julia, take care.
Bye.